there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2002 horror vampire sequel, Queen of the Damned. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I would like to give a special shout out to Shine for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below. And I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Queen of the Damned, it's technically a sequel to Interview with a Vampire, but it's kind of not. Like, it's this weird mishmash of different elements of the sequel novels that Anne Rice wrote. Because she wrote the original Interview with a Vampire, the first three Vampire Chronicles. And those were successful enough that all three of them were actually bought ahead of time by a studio, and when it comes to film rights. And after the commercial and critical success of Interview with a Vampire, Neil Jordan started working on developing a sequel based on the Vampire Lestat, but it didn't go anywhere. So then the project just was stuck in development hell, and it ultimately did not get made until they decided to just take elements from Queen of the Damned and the Vampire Lestat and just kind of throw them together. And the end result is very flawed because of that. It does. It feels like it's a jumbled mess of a script. Like it's multiple different story elements and plot points that are just crammed together haphazardly with not really that much thought put into them. And as a result, it makes for a film that is not what I would consider to be a good movie, but it's kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. Like, it's that kind of thing where it's like, it's bad, and I'm not going to sit here and defend the film, but I can't sit here and say that I didn't have fun watching it. I understand why some people aren't entertained by the movie, or they just think it's just a bad, lame film, but there are certain elements of this film where it's taking itself so seriously, but yet being so campy and over the top that it becomes so bad it's good. It's directed by Michael Rymer, and to me personally, I don't think his direction is really that bad. I would say one of the few elements of this film that are at all any good, legitimately, is the direction. I think he did a good job directing the movie. The film definitely had a big size and scope to it. The concert scenes in particular were really epic. And when it comes to other sequences featuring Akasha, the Vampire Queen, or the few action sequences that the film does have, there's a lot of inventive, creative, and lively camera work. This isn't a film that's just flaccid, limp when it comes to the camera. It's not a movie that's anemic visually. It's got a good sense of visual style to it, and there's a lot of scenes in it where the camera is very fluid. It's moving around. It's not stuck in one place. So I do want to give the director credit. I think it's not a bad job at all by the director, especially not to the point where he really wouldn't get a chance to do a whole lot after this. Like, he did Perfume and but he did Perfume after Queen of the Damned. After Queen of the Damned, he was just a TV guy. He was stuck doing Battlestar Galactica reboot episodes and episodes of like American Horror Story and Hannibal. Like, he didn't really get another opportunity to direct a feature film again. And I don't think he really deserved that, because it wasn't his fault that the film had so many issues, because it wasn't his direction that was the problem. It was the script by Scott Abbott and Michael Petroni, loosely based on The Queen of the Damned by Anne Rice, as well as elements of the vampire Lestat, or Lestat the Vampire, I forgot exactly what the name of it is. And in the novel, at least in one of the novels, Lestat does actually wind up becoming a rock star. So that's not something that this script just completely made up. But on the topic of that, I feel that this script should have just committed fully to either the Queen of the Damned story or to Lestat as a rock star. Instead, it tries to not commit fully to either one, and it tries to be a combination of Queen of the Damned and Akasha and her story, and Lestat and his story as a rock star, but also Lestat's story when it comes to his origin. Uh, and how he became a vampire, and then also about this other character named Jessie and what's going on with her in the Maharet, and all of these other secret sort of societies, or this secret vampire club, and her connection with these other vampires and why she feels like she wants to be around them. And it just never fully commits to anything, so it just becomes an absolute mess when it comes to the script and the story. I actually don't mind the idea of Lestat as a vampire rock star. It's out there, but it's unique, and I think it's kind of cool and inventive, and the film definitely has some fun with that concept, which is why I feel that it should have embraced it more. Like, here's an idea: have it be more of a film that focuses on Lestat fully and for the majority of the story, and his band. And a good chunk of the movie is about him deciding to start a band, and him finding a way to get his bandmates to trust him and see him as somebody who is actually a talented and viable performer and lead singer, not just a guy who just shows up randomly at a jam session and then it's like, hey, do you want to be famous? Do you want to be in my band? And then they just decide to join him because he's a vampire. But it would have been more interesting if, like, oh, they see him as this talented guy, and then he reveals down the line, oh, and by the way, I'm a vampire. But I think that can actually work in our favor, and here's why. And yeah, you deal with the trials and the tribulations of Lestat's band and the members, and then maybe there's something where he turns them into vampires. So then it's an all vampire band, and then you have to deal with all of that. And then maybe Jesse gets brought in at some point, and he falls in love with her, and he's trying to balance his new career as a lead singer of this massively popular new metal band, but also he wants to try to form a genuine relationship with this woman because she reminds him of his humanity and what he's lost. And that's what leads him to finding where Akasha is and resurrecting her, because he wants to be in the daylight so he can be with Jesse, uh, and he can actually be there for her during the day and the night. But because of that, Akasha starts this new reign of terror and just leaves a bloody wake of bodies. And it's up to Lestat, Jesse, and her team of vampire hunters, because uh, at a certain point you find out that she was a part of this secret vampire hunting society, and that creates some conflict between her and Lestat. But eventually, they hash things out. Lestat forms an uneasy alliance with these vampire hunters, and they team up to stop Akasha, and that's the finale. I think that could have worked. I think that would have been a lot better than what we got here, which wasn't really enough of the rock star angle for it to really stick or really stand out, other than just a few bits here and there. So there wasn't enough for you to fully sink your teeth into when it comes to that aspect of the script. If that isn't something that the producers or the studio felt was gonna work, then just commit fully to the Queen of the Damned angle and make it something along the lines of Stephen Sommers' The Mummy, but have it focus on Akasha. So it starts out with Akasha in Egypt, and you see her rise to power. You see what she does during her reign. You see how she's able to manipulate all these people, and then you see what happens when she is ultimately betrayed and then turned to stone. And that's the opening of the movie. You bring in Lestat at some point after that, where he winds up stumbling upon Akasha's. Well, actually, he doesn't stumble upon her tomb. He's looking for her tomb because he's so frustrated with his uh, uh, vampirism that he wants to find out who is the cause of this and whether or not this being or Akasha can actually cure him of his affliction, because he doesn't want to be a vampire anymore. It's caused him so much pain, and he's lost so many people that he's actually genuinely cared about throughout the years, and it's caused him to do all these awful, horrible things, and he wants to tap into his humanity again. And he sets her free, and he thinks he's doing something that can enable a positive outcome for him. But instead, it's the complete opposite. She cannot cure him. And now he's just unleashed this vampire queen. And all she wants to do is take over the world again. And she decides to do that by becoming a music star. So this is where you focus on Aaliyah. And you have her essentially take the place of Lestat and his band, but this time around it's like a pop star, big pop star, and it becomes in a way sort of a satire of pop stardom, and she's this just beautiful, charismatic vampire queen, and she becomes the biggest pop star on the planet. And Lestat is trying to convince other people and trying to tell people that she's not who she says she is. Eventually, through her rise to fame and popularity, she gets this massive platform that she uses to manipulate people, like she did in ancient Egypt, but she does it from the platform of a pop music star. And she's manipulating people and brainwashing people. It culminates in this big concert, and Lestat knows what's going to happen, where she's just going to feed on everybody there. And she is also expecting that there's going to be other vampires that are going to show up, but she wants that because she wants to feed on them so that she can become even more powerful and truly become genuinely unstoppable. They'll never be able to encase her in stone or stop her again. And so Lestat, he does his research and finds out about this secret society of vampire hunters, finds them, convinces them to help him. Along the way, he forms a connection and a bond and a relationship with them, and actually falls for Jessie because she's a member of the team. So you still have the romance angle. And then the finale is very similar, but instead of it being from the perspective of Lestat and him and his bandmates teaming up with the vampire hunters to take down Akasha on her own turf, this time around, it's this big pop concert, and it's up to Lestat and the vampire hunters to stop Akasha and send her back to hell, where she belongs. So there are multiple options that you could have utilized here, but it doesn't fully utilize either one of them. And I personally am leaning more towards the Lestat focused storyline because that is what this is intended to be. It's supposed to be a companion piece to Interview with a Vampire. It's not supposed to be an Akasha film, but I think the Akasha film could have worked too with Lestat as the hero. But what we got is just a mess. Like I said, it's one part prequel when it comes to Lestat's origin with him and Marius. It's one part new metal rock star movie with Lestat and his band. It's one part a vampire hunter movie with Jessie and her secret group of vampire hunters, and then another part mystery in terms of Jesse's connection with vampires, and it just doesn't work because there's just too many things going on at once, and they're all feeding off of one another, and as a result, like no one is really able to be fully satiated when it comes to the audience, let alone the script itself, because none of these plots ever become fully satiated. They don't really coalesce into something that's really that cohesive. The performances by the cast, I didn't hate Stuart Townsend. I know there's other people who really don't like him. I just thought he was there. Like, he doesn't have the charisma or the personality or the charm of Tom Cruise or even Brad Pitt early on in his career. But he's just there for me. Like, I thought he did have a good look. I feel I genuinely bought him as a rock star, as a lead of a rock band. He is trying to have a little bit of fun with the role, but the script isn't giving him as many moments to really shine in that department. But I don't think he was fully sleepwalking through the movie. It's just one of those things where I just feel he lacks a certain bit of charisma. So he comes across as more of a bland Lestat than he comes across as a charismatic one. And Lestat needs to be just bold and extra charismatic for the character to really work. And instead, you just get this kind of in the middle Lestat, which could have been worse, but it also could have been a lot better. Aaliyah, I think this is the last film role she did before she passed away. And for what she's asked to do, I thought she was fine. I know people have criticized her performance because it's campy and she's hamming it up in so many different ways, but I look at that as her having fun, and I enjoy the performance because of that. Also, she's just absolutely gorgeous in this movie. And I thought at times she was a little intimidating, especially when she showed up and took out the vampires at that vampire club. And like she did it in a very sexy way, but it was also still pretty badass. I mean, just lighting them on fire, walks out of the bar, it explodes in the background, and she's just swinging her hips. Like I thought it was actually a really cool scene. And Aaliyah just brought a certain presence to her that I really liked, and I thought it really added something to the film. Marguerite Moreau, who I'm familiar with as Connie from the Mighty Ducks movies. I was like, holy shit, it's Connie from the Mighty Ducks. um, I thought she was good too. I thought she actually delivered a pretty decent performance. Uh, it's just too bad that her and the lead guy, the lead vampire, Stuart Townsend, didn't really have the best chemistry. And they were supposed to be a couple. But also at the same time, I think the writing wasn't the best between the two. So I don't think there was a lot of moments for them to really click. Because there's a few scenes near the end where Marguerite's character, Jessie, she's now with Lestat and she's a vampire. And I don't know, it just seemed like the vibes were a little bit better between the two, because a lot of the time Stuart Townsend is just being very angsty when it comes to Lestat, and it feels like something out of a teen young adult novel. But here he's a little more relaxed. So I think if there was more of that when it comes to the movie, then the two would have been able to really possibly create a more special bond. But since it isn't there, it's just very inconsistent. Uh, the rest of the cast is fine as well. Like Paul McGann is David Talbot. Lena Olin is Maharet. Christian Manon as Mael. Lena Olin, I thought it was Barbara Hershey, but it's not. She just looks very similar to Barbara Hershey in this. Christian Manon as Mael. Claudia Black as Pandora. Vincent Perez as Marius. Vincent Perez? Oh, so it's the guy from The Crow, City of Angels. You know what? I think his performance as Marius in this was way better than his performance in City of Angels. So much so to the point where I didn't even know it was the same actor. Um, I actually liked his performance quite a bit in this. He played it very tongue in cheek, but it worked really well for the role that he was playing. Now, you also have Jonathan Davis, who is the lead singer of Korn, and he's uncredited as the singing voice for Lestat. Because of his contract, he couldn't actually perform the songs for the movie soundtrack, so David Draymond did the vocals for the soundtrack. Um, but that is also another element that really helps this movie. Like, I think Jonathan Davis's vocals in this are awesome. They are amazing. They're honestly some of my favorite work of his. And it's one of those movies where I think it succeeds when it comes to having a certain vibe to it. It's like if you can just vibe with the movie, then I think you can have a little bit more enjoyment out of it. But if you're not really getting the vibe, then I could totally see why some people would just think this is not for them. Uh, and the vibe is also something that's emphasized by the way that it's shot by Ian Baker, the cinematographer, and the way it's edited by Danny Cooper. I can see why some people would look at the editing and think it's a little bit too much, and I think at times it is. It's a little too over the top, especially when it comes to some of the fight scenes involving the vampires. Like they crank the camera up a little bit too fast, and the director and the editor, like they just became a little too obsessed with time lapse, and as a result, it does get a bit ludicrous, but it also kind of adds to the entertainment value when it comes to some of the scenes and how they're edited. And the cinematography in general is just really good. Like, I think it's a really well shot film. It's got some nice looking shots of the various different settings throughout the movie. I would say the best looking shots are definitely the ones that happen at the concert at Death Valley, though. But there's also some other good scenes too, with just Akasha and Lestat, or the scene in Akasha's tomb, when Lestat is telling his backstory. But yeah, it's a film that I could see why some people would look at the way it's edited and the way other things are done with it and think it's a little bit too bombastic and a little bit too much. And I think at times it could have definitely eased back a little, but I'm kind of glad that it goes full on over the top at times, because that just adds to the movie and just its guilty pleasure entertainment value. The music by Richard Gibbs and Jonathan Davis, I love this score, and I love the soundtrack. This is honestly one of my favorite soundtracks. I think the soundtrack absolutely slays. I mean, you not only have Jonathan Davis doing vocals. I mean, you also have so many other really talented new metal bands doing music for the soundtrack. I mean, you've got Forsaken, which honestly I think is one of Jonathan Davis's best works. I love that song. You've got Wayne Static of Static X doing a song called Not Meant for Me. You got David Draymond of Disturbed. You also have Disturbed's, Down with the Sickness that plays during the film. You've got Chester Bennington from Linkin Park doing System. You got Marilyn Manson doing Redeemer. You got Jay Gordon of Orgy doing Slept So Long. Yeah, the soundtrack contains other songs featured in the film, like The Body Crumbles by Dry Cell, Cold by Static X, Dead Cell by Papa Roach, Excess by Tricky, Headstrong by Earshot, Penetrate by Godhead, Down with the Sickness by Disturbed, like I mentioned, Change in the House of Flies by Deftones is another song I absolutely love, and Before I'm Dead by the Kidney Thieves. And I also really love how the score incorporates instrumental versions of the songs that you hear in the movie. So the song Forsaken, you actually hear instrumental versions of that song throughout the film, which just elevates the movie in a multitude of different ways to me. Like, it makes it a little bit more special, a little bit more unique, because you have Jonathan Davis actually doing the score along with his collaborator Richard Gibbs. And it's like a $35 million movie, and it actually does look like it's on the screen when it comes to the costume design, the production design, the art direction, even some of the visual effects. Like, I think some of the CGI looks a little bit bad, but then there's other moments of the CGI I think looks really good, especially near the end when Akasha is defeated and all the vampires feed on her and she turns black or becomes even blacker. She becomes black like charcoal, basically, and then just disintegrates. Um, I just think the way that whole scene is done, effects wise, is honestly pretty excellent. I will say this: when it comes to like the practical effects, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more in terms of like the gore. Like, I was kind of surprised you didn't get a lot of blood and a lot of, really visceral moments of gore and violence. Really would have made Akasha even more intimidating. You have this whole scene where you see this party, this pool party that's just been decimated by her, and there's just what looks like 50 bodies. And then Lestat and Akasha are walking along the beach, and there's like hundreds more people dead, but you never see the rampage. You don't see her go on a murder spree. And I think that's that was something that the film was lacking. And I think that would have been nice to see, especially see the practical effects, because some of the practical effects you saw in this are actually pretty good. So I think whoever was working on the movie definitely had a knack for it. But yeah, it's like 101 minutes, and I didn't think it was that dull and that boring. That's just me personally. I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's one of my personal favorites. No, but it's a film that I like the vibe of it. I like the visual style. I think it's well directed. Um, Aaliyah, she's not in it a lot, but the few scenes that she's in, I have fun with her performance, and I like the idea of a rock star vampire movie. It's so outside the box and it's so bizarre, and I love ideas like that. It doesn't quite work, but I appreciate the fact that it still tried to go there. And yeah, if you want to see a movie about, the potentially the world's deadliest girl boss, then yeah, I would definitely recommend Queen of the Damned sometime. But if it's not really something that you're really into, like the trailer doesn't really do anything for you, and you're not like a big fan of like the campier episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, then yeah, it's probably not gonna be a movie that's gonna really satiate your appetite for entertainment. But that's just my thoughts on Queen of the Damned, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.